One thing I see a lot of people from around the world write in about Dr. K, and I bet you see this on your YouTube channel too, and with your patients, is this sense of that I need to catch up with other people, that I've fallen behind in life, that I'm not where I want to go. And you get stuck in these kind of big emotional crises that I'm sure we're creating for ourselves. But if you're somebody that feels like I'm behind in life, what are some of the things that you recommend that you do to start to help yourself move forward?
Great question. So I would say first thing is you don't need to do anything. So this is where. So let's start with the understanding of what is falling behind. How would you define it, Mel?
I think falling behind, the first time I felt it, I'd say, was when I was graduating from college. And I noticed that, I was at Dartmouth and they did this on-campus recruiting. And all of a sudden there were a group of my friends that had secured jobs. And I had no idea what I was going to be doing for graduation. And so it was this sense that there was an order and a timeline for when you're supposed to do things in life that was either imposed from other people or somehow I imposed on myself. And now all of a sudden, I'm not on that timeline.
Okay, great.
Is that
beautiful example? So
okay?
Now we're going to tunnel down. If you want to conquer this thing, we need to tunnel down and understand what's precisely going on.
Hold on one second. Is that going to be too loud? Or the windows are shut? Never mind. You're not picking it up? Okay, great. Okay, the mics are that good. Okay,
So,
great.
Beautiful example. Let's tease it apart. So one is, these are actually, falling behind is two separate things.
Okay.
One needs to be solved, one needs to be abandoned.
Okay.
So one is you don't know what you're doing after graduation.
Right.
This is a reality. This is something that needs to be resolved. But this has nothing to do with anyone else. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I want to broaden this out because I would imagine this is the same thing people feel if they get a divorce or if they don't have kids when their friends are having kids, or if they're not married yet, or if their job isn't progressing, that this happens in a lot of different places in life. And so the first one is you got to realize, this has nothing to do with anybody else.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you have a problem in your life that needs to be solved, by all means solve it. The problem is that falling behind is not the same as, we're adding an additional layer, right? So you see that? So one is, I don't know what I'm doing after college. The second is everyone else does know what they're doing. But that is not your problem. Now you're doing something else. So this is where we get into the Sanskrit again. So we have this concept in Sanskrit called the ahamkara, or the ego. So the function of the ego is it is the sense of I. I am ... I am a man, I'm a doctor, I'm a this, I'm a that, whatever. I am behind, I'm ahead. All of those are ego. So if you look at the nature of that, all of those statements require a comparison. So any comparison that you make in your life is born of the ego. So I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm the stupidest person in the room. That requires comparison. And in my experience, when that is running the show, there's no way to win. Because people will say, no, Dr. K, but objectively it matters because, I don't know what I'm doing. Fair enough. I'm not saying that that problem doesn't need to be solved. But the problem with the ego is it'll keep on moving the goalposts on you. So even once you figure it out, you're not comparing. So here you are. Let's just think for a second, right? So here you are graduating. You don't have a job lined up. How does your mind choose to compare to all the people who do have jobs lined up as opposed to all the people who didn't graduate?
I don't know. It's just like punishing me. It could have easily been like, dude, you're so much further ahead than all these other people.
Absolutely, right? But the mind doesn't think like that.
Why? It's like torturing me. I don't want it to do this, Dr. K.
So this is what the ego does. The ego makes a Frankensteinian monster of your identity. I'm comparing my professional success to this person. I'm comparing my physical attractiveness to this person. I'm comparing my exercise capability to this fourth person. I'm comparing my relationship to this fifth person. And so always you're behind, always you're behind, always you're behind. And this is it's how we're wired, but it is the utter height of stupidity because you are living your life. You're not living anyone else's life. And then people will respond to that, but it matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but why make the comparison? Your problem is still the same without worrying about what anyone else is doing. You can by all means pay attention to other people and learn from them and use it to solve your own problems, but that process is egoless, right?
Yes.
So separate if you are falling behind, and I say this as someone who started med school at the age of 28. I remember going to a Christmas party when I was 26 years old. and seeing people that I went to high school with, and I haven't seen them in like 8 years because we left off to college. And I see them, and then they're like, "Oh," I'm like, "Hey, what are you up to?" They're like, "I just graduated from medical school. I'm going to be a trauma surgeon." And they're like, "What are you up to?" And I'm like, "I'm applying to medical school." Right? And I'm technically behind. There's no question about that, but it's absurd. What's the value of that? That doesn't help me in any way. I have my problem to solve. What other people are doing are completely independent of that.
Well, what I love about what you're saying is, and I've never thought about it this way, is that when you say I'm behind or you compare yourself to other people, you've now given yourself two problems. You've got
Absolutely.
the problem of I got to deal with my own life and
Yes.
what I actually want my life to be and what I need to be doing in a 24-hour window in terms of the actions to feel like I'm doing something about it. And then there's the other problem, which is how does that have anything to do with what all these other people are doing other than making you feel like shit?
Absolutely. Right? So this is where like teasing apart, removing the ego from the equation will eliminate the concept of falling behind, because falling behind is a relative. Right? So it requires someone else to be ahead. It is not a real thing. It is an abstraction of the mind. So if I were to ask you, so like I'll use a great example that confuses a lot of people. So there's no such thing as tall. Tall is not a physical aspect of reality. I can't biopsy you and find tall. I can't x-ray you and find tall. Height, you can have. You can objectively be a certain height. But tall is an abstraction that we apply to a physical reality. Does that kind of make sense?
I think you're like now in the stratosphere of you're a little too smart for me. So I'm like, okay, so why does this matter? Like we've labeled a certain height tall and labeled another height short.
You can't have tall without short. So you can be 5'6".
Yep.
Objectively. That is an aspect of reality.
Yes.
But the concept of tall, you can't measure tall. You can measure height. There is the reality of the world, and then there's the layer that our mind adds to it. So in order for, tall means different things. It's like, oh, this guy is 6'6". Wow, that guy is super short. What? Oh, we're talking about NBA players. Right? So everything is, and this is the weird thing, is we assume that this is reality, but this is all comparisons we make. It's abstractions of the mind. And as you abandon these things, and we'll talk about how, right? So falling behind is like, it's a concept. It's not a reality. The fact that I was 27 years old, had no job, was not a medical student, was doing that, that's a reality. Falling behind just adds a layer of crap that is in my head.
So I think when everybody sees this, there's a sigh of relief. But how does our perception hurt us?
Immensely. It's the short answer. Right? So we don't control our perception. So anything that we don't control how we perceive the world.
Yep.
We can, but it's not something that we do. Right? We assume that when our mind perceives something, we assume this is correct. This person is better than me. What utter idiocy. How do you measure that? You can't. It's a feeling. So now we get to the answer, which is ego is a defense mechanism against negative emotion. So if I think about someone who's secure versus someone who's insecure, right? So on that day when I met this person, I felt like I had fallen behind because my ego was active. I felt insecure. I felt embarrassed. I felt ashamed. So what ego does is anytime we feel shame, it sort of activates the ego, and then we'll make these comparisons.
What can anybody do to change this?
Resolve the underlying emotion. So once the negative emotion disappears, the ego will literally collapse. This is what we do in treatment of narcissists.
Okay, so if I am struggling because I am the only single person among my friends, and everywhere I look, I see people getting engaged, I see married couples having babies, I see clocks ticking, regardless of whether you're male, female, it's really bothering you. And so my perception becomes I'm the only freaking loser who can't find somebody. How do you change this perception?
Okay, so beautiful question. So I'm going to give you an alternate example.
Okay.
So can you envision that there's someone who's divorced, who has no kids, who is happy with their life?
Yes.
What's the difference between that person and you?
I'm unhappy.
So
because I'm comparing myself to everybody.
Absolutely. So this is the crazy thing that we don't realize. It's crazy that we're not taught this stuff. It is not the circumstances that are making you unhappy. Because you can have one divorced person, let's say the divorced 35-year-old woman with no kids, surrounded by in the same friend group, surrounded by the same people. I don't have kids, but 2 women who are divorced. One can be thrilled of being divorced at 35. Thank God
Right.
that I'm done with that marriage. Thank God I did not have kids with this person.
Yes.
Oh my, I've seen this in my practice, and I've seen people who feel devastated,
Yes.
who feel ashamed. So the circumstances, and this is the big mistake we make. We think that the circumstances are the cause for my happiness. Oh, I need to have kids. I need to get married again. And if I had kids or was married again, and I've had patients in my practice who made that mistake a couple of times, let me just find a different relationship. No, incorrect. It's not the circumstances. It is the way that you view them. And so if you look at that, you feel ashamed. You deal with the underlying shame, and that's where you grow. Now I'm cool with it. I felt ashamed, manage that shame, process that shame, work on that shame, acknowledge that shame. You know, I do feel like I made some mistakes. I have envy towards my friends. These are things that I want. And as you metabolize those emotions, the ego will go away. And now you're no longer sure. You can ask this person, are you behind? And you can say, yes. You can even look at me and you can say, am I behind? 100%. I'm still behind, because once you fall behind, there's no catching up. I have friends who graduated medical school at the age of 26, finished their residency training at the age of 29.
But you want to know what?
Yeah.
It depends what you're measuring. Because those same physicians that may be graduated 6 to 8 years, you look at the fact that you have 2 million YouTube subscribers and you're living the life of your dreams and you're sitting there like reaching people around the world with your work. And then they go, I'm falling behind. I'm not on social media. I'm not doing what Dr. K's doing. We all do this.
That's so interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
That it's what we fucking measure in here
Yes.
that determines whether we're behind. It is our stick of measurement. And I'm looking at them and I'm saying, oh my God, these people have so much money in the bank because they've been practicing medicine for 11 more years than I have. And they're looking at me and they're saying, oh, this guy is famous and he wrote a book. It's fucking dumb. It's all abstractions in the mind. Both of us have our realities. That is, and if there's a problem to solve, I'm not saying don't solve the problem. If you look at your life and you're 35 and you're divorced and you're saying, I'm ashamed of myself, I'm envious, I want a relationship, then go for it. By all means, create a relationship. But falling behind is not going to help you in any way. Right? Because then when you go on a date, what's going to happen? Desperation. Envy. I'm trying to create what someone else has. And I'm going to use your ass, who I'm on a date with, to fill in my imagination of what these other people want. So I'm going to try to mold you into this instead of accepting you for who you are. Instead of recognizing that if I accept you for who you are, I can have a completely different relationship that is even way better than what my friends have.
And it begins with accepting your ass for where you are.
100%. That's what I did many years ago in India. That's still what I do today. It's responsible for my success. I don't even view myself as successful. I wasn't a failure, now success. Now these are all abstractions of the mind. I am what I am. I do what I do. I wake up every day. On one day, it was studying. On another day, it was going to the hospital. Today, it's a podcast. Tomorrow, it'll be whatever. My life demands of me action every day. And if you devote yourself to that action, your life will be completely transformed.
Damn it, Dr. K. What are we getting wrong about motivation?
So much. The biggest mistake we make with motivation is that we try to increase it. This is what stuckness is. It's a lot of irrelevant movement.
We do use the word, I feel stuck, but you're saying that's actually the wrong word and it's inaccurate.
Yes, it's not that you have no motivation. It's that you have a very powerful motivation to not move.